The scorching sun beat down on Tamara Sullivan's pale face as she collapsed onto the dusty trail, her once fine dress now tattered and stained with the red dirt of the Arizona Territory. It was 1879, and the promise of a new life out west had withered like the sparse vegetation around her. 3 days without food, her canteen empty since yesterday morning, and now her strength had finally abandoned her completely. She had been a schoolteacher back in Boston before the scandal, before her fiancé had revealed his true nature and ruined her reputation. The West was supposed to be her salvation, not her grave. Tamara's vision blurred as she stared up at the cloudless blue sky, wondering if this lonely stretch of desert would be the last thing she'd ever see. The rhythmic pounding of hooves barely registered in her fading consciousness. A shadow fell across her face, blocking the merciless sun. A man's voice, deep and concerned, seemed to come from miles away. "Madam, can you hear me?" Tamara tried to respond, but her parched lips could only form a silent plea. Strong arms lifted her from the ground, and she caught a glimpse of a weathered face beneath a wide-brimmed hat before darkness claimed her. Owen McCready had been tracking a mountain lion that had been picking off calves from his herd when he spotted something unusual on the trail ahead. At first he thought it might be abandoned luggage, but as he drew closer, the shape resolved into a woman's crumpled form. He dismounted quickly, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the ground. The woman was clearly in a bad way, her skin hot with sunburn, lips cracked from dehydration. Owen touched her neck, relieved to find a pulse, though it was weak and fluttering like a trapped bird. "Madam, can you hear me?" he asked, already reaching for his canteen. When she didn't respond beyond a faint movement of her lips, Owen knew he had to act fast. He gathered her into his arms, surprised at how little she weighed, and lifted her onto his horse. Mounting behind her, he cradled her against his chest to keep her from falling as he turned his horse toward home. Owen's ranch, the Lazy M, was a modest spread compared to some in the territory, but he'd built it from nothing after coming west following the war. 10 years of hard work had given him a sturdy cabin, a small but growing herd of cattle, and enough stability to survive the harsh realities of frontier life. What it hadn't given him was company. At 32, Owen had grown accustomed to solitude, if not entirely comfortable with it. The woman stirred slightly as they approached the cabin, a low moan escaping her lips. "Hold on, madam," Owen said, his voice gentle despite its natural roughness. "We're almost there." Inside, he placed her carefully on his bed, the only proper one in the cabin. He dampened a cloth with cool water from the bucket by the door and placed it on her forehead, then gently tipped a few drops of water between her parched lips. She coughed weakly but swallowed. For the next hour, Owen tended to his unexpected guest with patient care, gradually giving her more water until some color returned to her cheeks. As the sun began to set, he prepared a thin broth, knowing that a starving person couldn't handle rich food right away. Tamara woke fully to the smell of something cooking. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was or how she'd gotten there. The ceiling above her was rough-hewn wood, not the open sky she last remembered. She tried to sit up but found herself too weak. "Easy now," came a voice from across the room. "You've had a rough time of it." A man approached the bed, carrying a steaming mug. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a face weathered by sun and wind. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and his eyes, a striking shade of green, watched her with concern. "Where am I?" Tamara managed to ask, her voice a raspy whisper. "My ranch. The Lazy M found you passed out on the trail about 5 miles east of here." He held out the mug. "Think you can manage some broth? You need to start slow." Tamara nodded, and with his help she propped herself up enough to sip the warm liquid. It was simple but tasted better than anything she could remember. "Thank you, Mr. McCready. Owen McCready." He pulled a chair closer to the bed. "And you are Tamara Sullivan." She took another careful sip. "I was traveling to Silverdale. I'm to be the new schoolteacher there." Owen's eyebrows rose. "Silverdale's another 30 miles west. Were you traveling alone?" Tamara nodded, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "The stagecoach dropped me in Clifton. They said another would come for Silverdale passengers, but after 2 days I decided to walk. I thought." She trailed off, realizing how foolish her decision had been. "That's a harsh stretch of country, even for those who know it," Owen said, no judgment in his tone. "What happened to your provisions?" "I had a small bag with food and water. A man on horseback took it yesterday morning." Tamara's voice trembled at the memory. "He left me my trunk, said it was too heavy to bother with." Owen's jaw tightened. "There have been reports of robberies along that trail. Sheriff's been trying to catch them for months." He stood and moved back to the fireplace. "You need rest and food. Silverdale can wait until you're stronger." Over the next 3 days, Tamara slowly regained her strength under Owen's careful attention. He fed her increasingly substantial meals, moving from broth to stew to more solid fare as her body adjusted. He was gone during much of the daylight hours, tending to his ranch duties, but always made sure she had water and food within reach before he left. On the 4th morning, Tamara woke feeling significantly better. Sunlight streamed through the cabin's single window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. For the first time, she took in her surroundings properly. The cabin was simple but neat. A fireplace dominated one wall with a small table and 2 chairs nearby. Shelves held a few books, cooking implements, and supplies. Her trunk sat in a corner, and she realized Owen must have gone back to retrieve it while she was recovering. Carefully, Tamara swung her legs over the side of the bed and tested her weight. Her legs felt shaky but held. She was wearing a man's shirt that hung to her knees. Her own clothes must have been too dirty or damaged. The thought of Owen changing her clothes brought heat to her cheeks, though she knew it had been necessary. The door opened, and Owen stepped inside, carrying an armful of firewood. He stopped short when he saw her standing. "You're up," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "Yes, thanks to you." Tamara smoothed down the shirt self-consciously. "I don't know how to thank you properly, Mr. McCready. You saved my life." Owen set the wood by the fireplace and straightened. "Any decent person would have done the same. Perhaps, but not everyone would have taken such good care of a stranger." She gestured to the trunk. "You even went back for my belongings. Wasn't much trouble. Found it right where you described." Owen moved to the stove. "Hungry?" "I've got some eggs from my chickens." "That would be wonderful." Tamara took a tentative step, then another, making her way to the table. "I should be able to continue to Silverdale soon. The school term starts in 2 weeks, and I need to prepare." Owen cracked eggs into a pan. "Silverdale's a nice enough town, growing fast with the silver mine doing well." He glanced at her. "But you shouldn't travel alone. Stage comes through here every Wednesday. That's 4 days from now." "I couldn't impose on your hospitality that long," Tamara protested, though the thought of setting out alone again filled her with dread. "It's no imposition." Owen's voice was matter of fact. "Besides, you still need to regain your strength. 4 days of good food and rest will make all the difference." Tamara wanted to argue but knew he was right. "Then I insist on earning my keep. I may not know much about ranch work, but I can cook and clean while you're outside." A small smile, the first she'd seen, tugged at the corner of Owen's mouth. "I won't turn down home-cooked meals. Been eating my own cooking too long." That afternoon, with Owen's permission, Tamara opened her trunk and changed into one of her own dresses, a simple blue cotton that had survived the journey relatively unscathed. She washed her face and arranged her hair as best she could without a proper mirror, then set about tidying the cabin. When Owen returned from checking his herd, he found the cabin swept, his sparse belongings organized, and the scent of baking bread filling the air. Tamara stood by the stove, her cheeks flushed from the heat, looking more like the schoolteacher she was meant to be than the half-dead woman he'd rescued. "Something smells good," he said, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. "I found flour and yeast among your supplies," Tamara explained. "I hope you don't mind. I also made a stew with some of the vegetables from your garden. Mind, this is the best the cabin smelled since I built it." Owen washed his hands in the basin by the door. "Don't think I've had fresh bread in months." They ate together at the small table, the first meal they'd shared with Tamara fully conscious and sitting up. Owen found himself watching her more than eating, noticing the way her brown hair caught the light from the lamp, how her blue eyes brightened when she smiled. "Tell me about Silverdale," Tamara said, breaking a comfortable silence. "What are the people like, the children?" Owen considered the question. "It's a mining town, so there's a mix. Miners and their families, shopkeepers, ranchers from the surrounding area. About 20 school-age children last I heard. The previous teacher left to get married. And the school itself, one room, fairly new. The mine owner, Jenkins, paid for it, wants to attract more families to the area." Owen watched her expression. "You ever taught in a place like this before?" Tamara hesitated. "No, I taught at a girls' academy in Boston. This will be different." "What brought you all the way out here?" Owen asked, curiosity getting the better of him. A shadow crossed Tamara's face. "I needed a change, a fresh start." She looked down at her plate. "Boston held too many unpleasant memories." Owen nodded, recognizing the tone of someone who didn't want to elaborate. He'd heard it in his own voice often enough. "Well, Silverdale's about as different from Boston as you can get. People are mostly decent, though. They'll give you a fair chance." "That's all I ask for," Tamara said softly. The next morning, Owen showed Tamara around the ranch. It wasn't large, a small herd of cattle, a vegetable garden, a chicken coop, a barn with his 2 horses, and a workshop where he did repairs. But it was clear he took pride in what he'd built. "You manage all this alone?" Tamara asked as they walked back toward the cabin. "Mostly. Hire extra hands during roundup and branding." Owen squinted at the distant hills. "It's enough for one man, never saw the need for more." "It's impressive," Tamara said sincerely. "Creating something from nothing takes courage and determination." Owen glanced at her, unused to praise. "Just work is all, important work. You're producing food, contributing something real." Tamara stopped to look back at the ranch. "In Boston, I sometimes felt I was just existing. Teaching girls who would marry well and never use their education for anything meaningful. And now you'll teach children who might never leave the territory," Owen pointed out. "But they'll need their education all the more," Tamara countered, "to survive and thrive in a challenging place. To build something meaningful, as you have." Owen had never thought of it that way. Education had always seemed a luxury to him, something for people with time and money to spare. But Tamara's perspective made him see it differently. That evening, as Owen sat mending a bridle while Tamara read one of his few books, he found himself stealing glances at her. In just a few days, she had transformed his solitary cabin into something that felt like a home. The thought of her leaving for Silverdale left an unexpected hollowness in his chest. "You like stories?" Tamara asked suddenly, looking up from the book. "Never had much time for them," Owen admitted. "Would you mind if I read aloud? This is quite good." Owen shrugged, trying to appear indifferent though he was secretly pleased. "If you'd like." Tamara began reading, her voice clear and expressive. It was a tale of adventure that Owen had never managed to finish himself, but hearing it through her voice brought the story to life. Before he knew it, an hour had passed and he was completely engrossed. When she finally stopped, her voice growing tired, Owen was disappointed. "You're good at that, making the words mean something." Tamara smiled, pleased by the compliment. "That's what teaching is, really. Making words and ideas come alive for others." "Your students in Silverdale will be lucky to have you," Owen said, and meant it. The next day brought dark clouds and the promise of rain. Owen worked quickly to secure everything around the ranch, bringing firewood inside and checking that the animals had proper shelter. By midday, the first heavy drops began to fall, and soon a steady downpour drummed on the cabin roof. Forced inside, Owen found himself sharing close quarters with Tamara for longer than usual. She had prepared a midday meal of cornbread and beans, simple but satisfying. "Does it rain often here?" she asked as they ate. "Not often enough," Owen replied. "When it does, it's usually like this, hard and fast. Good for the land, though. Everything will be greener tomorrow." A crack of thunder made Tamara jump slightly, and Owen noticed her hands tighten around her cup. "Not fond of storms?" he asked gently. "I don't mind the rain," she said, "but the thunder, it reminds me of—" She stopped, her expression troubled. "Of what?" Owen prompted after a moment. Tamara sighed. "The war. I was young, but I remember the sound of cannon fire. My father was a Union officer. He didn't come home." Owen felt a pang of shared understanding. "I was in the 5th Texas Cavalry, Confederate side." Their eyes met, acknowledging the odd connection that they had once been on opposite sides of a conflict that had torn the nation apart. "Did you?" Tamara began hesitantly. "Lose many friends?" "Too many." Owen's voice was quiet. "It's why I came west afterward. Needed space and sky after all that death. Needed to build something instead of destroy." "I understand that need." Tamara's gaze was sympathetic without pity. "Is that why you're alone here? Because of what you saw in the war?" The question caught Owen off guard. No one had ever asked him so directly before. "Partly," he admitted. "And partly because out here being alone is easier. People in town, they want you to be sociable, to talk about things that don't matter. I never got the hang of that." "Some things are worth the effort of connection," Tamara said softly. "Even if it's difficult." Owen looked at her, really looked, and saw understanding in her eyes. Not judgment, not pity, just recognition of a kindred spirit who knew what it meant to carry invisible wounds. The rain continued through the afternoon and into the evening. They passed the time with Tamara reading aloud again, then Owen teaching her how to play a simple card game. The close quarters, which might have been awkward, instead fostered a growing ease between them. As night fell and the rain showed no signs of letting up, Owen addressed the sleeping arrangements. "You take the bed again. I'll make a pallet by the fire." "You've already given up your bed for days," Tamara protested. "I can sleep by the fire tonight." "Wouldn't be proper," Owen said firmly. "Besides, that floor gets cold, rain or no. I'm used to rough sleeping." Tamara looked like she wanted to argue further but nodded. "Thank you. You're a good man, Owen McCready." The simple compliment affected Owen more than he expected. "Get some rest," he said gruffly, turning away to hide the emotion on his face. That night, listening to the rain on the roof and the occasional soft sound of Tamara turning in her sleep, Owen realized how accustomed he'd grown to her presence in just a few days. The thought of returning to his solitary existence after she left for Silverdale now seemed unbearably empty. Morning broke clear and bright, the landscape washed clean by the rain. As Owen had predicted, everything looked greener, more vibrant. He rose early, careful not to wake Tamara, and went to check on his animals. When he returned, he found Tamara outside, her face turned up to the sun, eyes closed in apparent contentment. She'd pinned her hair up loosely, and a few escaped strands caught the light like burnished copper. Owen stopped, struck by the simple beauty of the moment. Tamara sensed his presence and opened her eyes, smiling when she saw him. "You were right. Everything looks renewed." "Rain has a way of doing that," Owen agreed, coming to stand beside her. "Making things grow that seemed dead." "A second chance," Tamara mused, then looked at him directly. "Like you gave me," Owen shook his head, "you would have found your way." "We both know that's not true. I was dying on that trail." Her voice was earnest. "You didn't just save my life, Owen. You restored my faith that there are good people in the world. After what happened in Boston, I'd begun to doubt that." "What did happen in Boston?" Owen asked quietly, sensing she might finally be ready to tell him. Tamara sighed, her gaze drifting to the distant hills. "I was engaged to be married. Charles Whitmore, from a respected family. I thought he loved me." Her voice hardened slightly. What he loved was the idea of a proper wife who would look the other way while he continued his associations with other women. Owen frowned. "He was unfaithful before you were even married." "Yes." When I confronted him, he laughed, said I was naive to expect fidelity, that all men of his station had arrangements. Tamara's hands clenched at the memory. "I broke the engagement. He spread rumors that I was unstable, difficult. The school where I taught asked me to leave. No one would hire me." "So you came west," Owen concluded. "So I came west," Tamara confirmed, "where no one knew me or my scandal, where I could start fresh." Owen felt a surge of anger at the man who had hurt her, followed by admiration for her courage. "Takes grit to leave everything behind and journey into the unknown. Or desperation," Tamara said with a small, sad smile. "Both, maybe." Owen gestured toward the cabin. "Come on. I'll make breakfast today." The day passed quickly, with Owen attending to ranch chores he'd neglected during the rain, and Tamara helping where she could. By unspoken agreement, they avoided mention of her impending departure, but it hung between them like an approaching storm. That evening, as they sat outside watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of orange and purple, Owen made a decision. "I'll ride with you to Silverdale," he said abruptly. "When the stage comes, make sure you arrive safely." Tamara looked at him, surprise evident in her expression. "You don't need to do that. I've imposed enough." "It's not an imposition. I need supplies anyway," Owen said, though it wasn't entirely true. "And I'd feel better knowing you got there safely." "Thank you," Tamara said after a moment. "I'd appreciate the company." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell and stars began to appear in the vast sky above. Owen was acutely aware of Tamara beside him, of the scent of soap and something uniquely her, of the way the fading light softened her features. "I'll miss this," Tamara said quietly. "The peace here. The simplicity." "Silverdale's not so complicated," Owen offered. "Not compared to Boston, anyway. It's not just that." Tamara turned to look at him. "I'll miss your company, Owen. You've been kind when you had no reason to be." "Not hard to be kind to you," Owen said, the words coming out before he could consider them. A soft smile touched Tamara's lips. "Still, thank you." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Owen found himself leaning slightly toward her, drawn by something he couldn't name. For a heartbeat, he thought she might be leaning toward him too. Then a coyote howled in the distance, breaking the spell. Owen cleared his throat and stood. "Getting cold. We should head inside." Tamara nodded, and if she was disappointed, she hid it well. "Yes, of course." Tuesday, the day before the stagecoach was due, dawned clear and bright. Owen rose early, as was his habit, and found Tamara already awake, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee. "Morning," he said, pouring himself a cup. "Sleep well?" "Not really," Tamara admitted. "Too many thoughts." Owen nodded, understanding. "About Silverdale, partly." She looked up at him. "Owen, I need to ask you something. Go ahead. These past days." Tamara hesitated, then continued more firmly. "I felt a connection between us, something unexpected. I wonder if you felt it too, or if I'm imagining things." Owen's heart hammered in his chest. He'd never been good with words, especially not about feelings, but Tamara deserved honesty. "You're not imagining it," he said quietly, "but you have a life waiting in Silverdale, a purpose." "I do," Tamara agreed, "but purposes can change. Lives can take unexpected turns." She reached across the table and touched his hand. "I've been thinking. The school in Silverdale doesn't start for 2 weeks. Perhaps I could stay here a little longer, get to know you better before I decide." Owen looked at their hands, then at her face, open, hopeful but not demanding. "You'd delay going to Silverdale. For me, for us," Tamara corrected gently. "To see if this connection is something worth exploring." A future Owen had never dared imagine suddenly seemed possible, not just the ranch and the solitude he'd grown accustomed to, but something richer, fuller. A shared life. "I'd like that," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'd like that very much." Tamara's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Then it settled. I'll stay a while longer." When the stagecoach rumbled past the next day, neither of them was on it. Instead, they were building something neither had expected to find in the harsh landscape of the Arizona Territory, a chance at love, born from the simple act of one human being helping another in their time of need. The following weeks unfolded in a gentle rhythm of shared work and growing intimacy. Owen showed Tamara more about ranch life, how to gather eggs without upsetting the hens, how to tell when the garden vegetables were ripe for picking, how to recognize the subtle signs of changing weather in the sky and wind. Tamara, in turn, brought her own skills, not just cooking and keeping the cabin, but reading aloud in the evenings, teaching Owen about the books he'd owned but never fully appreciated. She had a talent for making everyday moments special, for finding joy in simple pleasures. One evening, as they walked along the creek that bordered the eastern edge of Owen's property, Tamara stopped to watch the sunset reflecting in the water. "It's beautiful here," she said softly. "I never imagined finding such peace in a place so far from everything I knew." Owen, standing beside her, felt the weight of unspoken words in his chest. The 2 weeks were nearly up, and though neither had mentioned Silverdale, the deadline loomed between them. "Tamara," he began, his voice unusually hesitant, "I need to ask you something important." She turned to face him, her expression open and attentive. "Yes, these past weeks have been. I've never." Owen struggled, then started again more directly. "I don't want you to go to Silverdale. I want you to stay here with me." Tamara's eyes widened. "Owen, are you asking?" "I'm asking you to marry me," he said, the words rushing out now. "I know it's sudden, and I don't have much to offer compared to the life you knew in Boston. But I promise to work hard every day to make you happy, to build something good together." Tears welled in Tamara's eyes, catching the golden light of sunset. "Oh, Owen, you have no idea how much you're offering me, a home, purpose, love." She stepped closer, resting her hands on his chest. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you." Owen's heart soared. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, their first kiss, sweet and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both were smiling. "What about the school in Silverdale?" Owen asked, suddenly remembering her commitment. "I'll write to them tomorrow," Tamara said. "Explain that circumstances have changed. They'll find another teacher." She looked around at the ranch, her expression thoughtful. Besides, there are children nearby who could use education. Perhaps I could start a small school here for the ranchers' children who can't make it to town regularly." Owen nodded, impressed by her quick thinking and adaptability. "That could work. Reynolds has 3 youngsters and the Garcias have 2, all within riding distance. See a purpose right here." Tamara's face glowed with happiness. "And in the meantime, I can help you with the ranch, make this cabin a proper home." They walked back to the cabin hand in hand, planning their future together as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. What had begun as a rescue, a man finding a woman weak from hunger and thirst, had transformed into something neither had expected to find in the rugged frontier: love, partnership, and the promise of a shared life. 3 days later, they rode into the small town of Copper Springs, the nearest settlement to Owen's ranch. Their first stop was the general store, where Owen introduced Tamara to the proprietor, Samuel Dawkins, and his wife, Martha. "Well now, Owen McCready with a lady friend," Samuel said, his eyebrows rising in surprise. "Never thought I'd see the day." "More than a friend, Sam," Owen corrected, his hand finding Tamara's. "This is Tamara Sullivan, soon to be Tamara McCready. We're looking to get married." Martha Dawkins clapped her hands together in delight. "Oh my, this is wonderful news." She hurried around the counter to take Tamara's hands. "My dear, you must tell us everything. How did you two meet?" As Tamara related a simplified version of their story, leaving out the more harrowing details of her near-death experience, Owen noticed how easily she conversed with the Dawkinses. She had a natural warmth that drew people to her, a quality he had benefited from but now saw from an outside perspective. "We're hoping to find Reverend Thompson," Owen said when Tamara finished her tale. "Is he still in town?" "He sure is," Samuel confirmed. "Lives behind the church. Been performing more weddings lately, seems the territory's finally attracting more women." He winked at Tamara. "Good timing on your part, madam." They thanked the Dawkinses and continued to the small white church at the end of the main street. The Reverend, a kindly man in his 60s, was delighted to meet them and readily agreed to perform the ceremony. "I can do it tomorrow if you like," he offered. "Sunday after regular services. The congregation would be pleased to witness it, I'm sure. We don't get many weddings out here." Owen looked at Tamara questioningly. "Tomorrow suits me, but it's your decision. We can wait if you want something more. Elaborate." Tamara squeezed his hand. "Tomorrow is perfect. I don't need anything fancy, just you and me and honest words between us." With the wedding arranged, they spent the remainder of the day purchasing supplies and a few special items for the occasion, including a simple but pretty blue dress for Tamara that Martha Dawkins helped her select. They stayed the night at the town's small hotel, in separate rooms as propriety demanded. Owen lay awake longer than usual, his mind filled with thoughts of the future and the remarkable turn his life had taken. Just weeks ago, he had been a solitary rancher with little prospect of change. Now, he was hours away from having a wife, a partner to share his days and build a life with. The morning dawned clear and cool, a perfect late summer day. The small church filled with curious townspeople, eager to witness the confirmed bachelor Owen McCready take a wife. Word had spread quickly, as it always did in small communities. Owen stood at the front of the church in his best clothes, not formal by Eastern standards, but clean and well-maintained. His usual stubble was shaved clean, his dark hair neatly trimmed by his own hand that morning. When Tamara entered from the back of the church, a hush fell over the congregation. She wore the blue dress they had purchased the day before, her brown hair arranged in soft waves around her face, adorned with small white flowers Martha Dawkins had provided. She carried no bouquet, needed no elaborate trappings. Her smile, directed solely at Owen, outshone any such accessories. The ceremony was simple and brief, but the words held profound meaning for both of them. When Reverend Thompson pronounced them husband and wife, Owen kissed Tamara with a tenderness that brought tears to the eyes of several witnesses. "Mrs. McCready," he whispered as they turned to face the congregation. "Mr. McCready," she returned, her eyes shining with happiness. A small reception followed at the hotel's dining room, arranged hastily by Martha Dawkins and other women from the church. The townspeople, many of whom Owen had known for years but rarely socialized with, offered congratulations and well wishes. "You've got yourself a fine woman there, Owen," Samuel Dawkins said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Don't know how you managed it, but you'd better treat her right." "I intend to," Owen assured him, his eyes finding Tamara across the room where she was deep in conversation with several women. They departed mid-afternoon, eager to return to the ranch, their home now, not just Owen's. As they rode side by side, Tamara in a borrowed side saddle, the landscape seemed different somehow. The same rocks and trees and distant mountains, but transformed by the knowledge that they would face it together from now on. "Happy?" Owen asked simply as they crested the rise that overlooked the ranch. "More than I can say," Tamara replied, her voice filled with quiet joy. "It feels right, being here with you, like I've found where I belong after searching for so long." They rode down to the cabin, the first day of their married life unfolding before them like the valley below, full of promise and possibility. The weeks that followed were filled with adjustments and discoveries, as they learned to live together as husband and wife. Owen, accustomed to solitude and his own routines, found himself initially disoriented by the constant presence of another person. But that disorientation quickly gave way to appreciation for the warmth and life Tamara brought to his world. Tamara, for her part, had to learn the rhythms of ranch life, the early mornings, the physical demands, the isolation from town and society. But she approached each challenge with determination and good humor, asking questions when needed and finding ways to contribute that complemented Owen's established patterns. True to her word, Tamara began organizing a small school for the children of neighboring ranches. She rode with Owen to visit the families, introducing herself and explaining her background as a teacher. The response was enthusiastic. Many of the children had received only sporadic education when their parents could manage the long trip to town. "We can use the front room," Tamara told Owen as they planned the space. 3 days a week to start. The Reynolds children can come Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and the Garcias on Tuesdays and Thursdays, along with the Petersons' boy. Owen marveled at her organizational skills and the ease with which she adapted her formal training to the practical needs of frontier children. "What will you teach them?" "Reading, writing, arithmetic to start," Tamara said thoughtfully. "But also practical knowledge, local plants and animals, weather patterns, basic medical care. Things they'll need out here more than classical literature or ancient history." By October, Tamara's small school was running smoothly. 6 children in total attended, ranging in age from 7 to 14. They arrived on horseback or in small wagons, carrying lunch pails and eager expressions. Tamara taught with patience and creativity, using the ranch and surrounding landscape as a living classroom when weather permitted. Owen, watching her with the children one afternoon as they examined different types of rocks found on the property, felt a swell of pride and affection. She had taken what might have been a restrictive role, a rancher's wife, isolated from her profession, and transformed it into something that served the community while fulfilling her own sense of purpose. As autumn deepened, bringing cooler temperatures and changing colors to the landscape, their bond grew stronger. The physical aspect of their marriage, initially approached with some shyness on both parts, had blossomed into a deep intimacy that continually surprised and delighted them. One evening in late October, as they sat by the fire after supper, Tamara set aside her mending and looked at Owen with an expression he couldn't quite read. "I have something to tell you," she said, her voice both nervous and excited. Owen put down the bridle he was repairing. "What is it?" "I believe." Tamara took a deep breath, then smiled. "I believe I'm going to have a baby, our baby." For a moment, Owen couldn't speak. The news hit him like a physical force, not unpleasant but overwhelming. A baby, a child of his own, a family. Owen. Tamara's voice held a note of uncertainty at his silence. He moved to kneel before her chair, taking her hands in his. "A baby," he repeated, his voice rough with emotion. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without a doctor's confirmation," Tamara said. "It's early yet. The baby wouldn't come until late spring or early summer, but all the signs are there." Owen's face broke into a smile of such pure joy that Tamara's eyes filled with tears. He leaned forward to kiss her, then rested his forehead against hers. "Thank you," he whispered, "for coming into my life, for staying, for this gift." "It's a gift for both of us," Tamara said softly. "A new life, our future." That night, lying beside his sleeping wife, Owen thought about the chain of events that had brought them to this moment. If he hadn't decided to track that mountain lion that day, if he'd taken a different trail, if he'd been even an hour later, Tamara might have died alone in the desert, and he would never have known what he was missing. The thought was unbearable. He placed a gentle hand on Tamara's still flat stomach, marveling at the miracle growing within. Life was fragile and precious. He knew that from his war experiences. But it was also resilient and determined, pushing through hardship toward light and growth, like Tamara herself had done. Like their child would do. Winter came early that year, bringing snow in November that blanketed the ranch in white. The cold temperatures meant fewer children could make the journey for school, so Tamara adapted, sending assignments home with parents when they came to town, and using the extra time to prepare for the baby. She sewed small garments from fabric purchased in town, lined a wooden crate Owen built as a cradle, and read what few medical books were available about childbirth and infant care. Her practical approach impressed Owen, who had seen too many women approach motherhood with fear rather than preparation. Christmas was a simple but meaningful celebration, their first as a married couple. They exchanged modest gifts: a hand-tooled leather journal for Tamara, a knitted scarf for Owen. But the greatest gift, they agreed, was the life they were building together and the child that would join them in the coming year. January brought harsh weather and the isolation that winter imposed on remote ranches. For days at a time, snow made travel impossible, and they were confined to the cabin and immediate surroundings. But rather than feeling trapped, they found a deeper connection in the quiet hours together, reading, talking, planning for the future. "What shall we name the baby?" Tamara asked one evening as she worked on a tiny blanket by the fire. Owen looked up from the ledger where he was calculating feed supplies. "Hadn't thought about it yet. Any ideas? If it's a boy, perhaps Thomas, after my father," Tamara suggested. "Or William, that was my grandfather's name." "Good, strong names," Owen agreed. "For a girl." Tamara's expression softened. "I've always liked Elizabeth, or maybe Sarah." "Sarah was my mother's name," Owen said quietly. "She died when I was 12. "Then Sarah it is if we have a daughter," Tamara decided, reaching over to touch his hand. The gesture, simple as it was, reminded Owen again of how completely Tamara understood him, how she honored his past while helping him build a future. As winter gave way to spring, Tamara's body changed with the landscape swelling with new life as the earth awakened from its frozen sleep. Her school resumed with the better weather, though she tired more easily now and shortened the sessions. In April, Owen hired a young man from town, James Fletcher, to help with the spring calving and other ranch work. It was an expense they hadn't planned, but Owen insisted. "You need to rest more," he told Tamara firmly. "And I need to be able to check on you during the day, not be stuck out with the herd." Tamara didn't argue. At 6 months pregnant, she found her energy limited and was grateful for the help that allowed Owen to be more present. James proved to be a hardworking and respectful young man, eating meals with them but sleeping in the barn, giving them privacy in the evenings. As May turned to June, the heat returned to the territory, and Tamara's time drew near. Owen arranged for Martha Dawkins, who had experience as a midwife, to stay with them for the final weeks of Tamara's pregnancy. The older woman arrived with a trunk full of supplies and a no-nonsense attitude that reassured both expectant parents. "First babies often take their time," Martha told them, "but everything looks to be progressing normally. You're healthy and strong, Tamara, and that's what matters most." On the evening of June 18, 1880, Tamara felt the first pains. She was sitting on the porch, enjoying the cooler air after a hot day, when the cramping sensation made her gasp. "Owen," she called, trying to keep her voice steady. "I think it's starting." The next 12 hours were a blur of pain, encouragement, fear, and finally, incredible joy. Martha directed proceedings with calm efficiency, giving Owen tasks to keep him occupied while she attended to Tamara. Despite his experience with calving and foaling, nothing had prepared Owen for the intensity of human birth or the depth of his concern for Tamara's well-being. Just after sunrise on June 19, their daughter entered the world with a strong cry that immediately brought tears to Owen's eyes. Martha cleaned the baby, wrapped her in a soft blanket and placed her in Tamara's arms. "She's perfect," Tamara whispered, her face radiant despite her exhaustion. Sarah Elizabeth McCready. Owen sat carefully on the edge of the bed, one arm around Tamara's shoulders, the other hand gently touching his daughter's tiny face. "She's beautiful, like her mother." Martha slipped quietly from the room, giving the new family their first moments alone together. "Thank you," Owen said, his voice rough with emotion. "For her, for everything." Tamara leaned against him, their daughter cradled between them. "This is just the beginning, Owen, our beginning." The summer of 1880 passed in a haze of sleepless nights and joyful discoveries, as Owen and Tamara adjusted to parenthood. Sarah proved to be a strong, healthy baby with her father's green eyes and her mother's determined expression. She became the center of their world, transforming the ranch from a place of work to a true home filled with love and purpose. Tamara's small school resumed in September, now with baby Sarah as an unofficial student, sleeping in a cradle in the corner while her mother taught. The older children were fascinated by the infant, and Tamara incorporated practical childcare lessons into her teaching, knowing these skills would serve her students well in their future lives on the frontier. By the time Sarah's first birthday approached, the changes in their lives seemed both monumental and completely natural, as if they couldn't imagine any other way of being. The solitary rancher and the Boston schoolteacher had created something neither had dared hope for, a family bound by love and mutual respect, thriving in the challenging landscape of the Arizona Territory. On the anniversary of the day Owen had found Tamara on the trail, they rode together to the spot, Sarah securely held in her father's arms. The summer heat was building, but a gentle breeze made the day bearable. "It seems impossible that it was only 2 years ago," Tamara said, looking around at the familiar landscape. "I feel as though I've lived a lifetime since then." "In some ways, we have," Owen replied, shifting Sarah to better see her curious face as she watched a hawk circling overhead. "A whole new life that started right here." Tamara reached out to touch his arm, her expression solemn. "I've never properly thanked you, Owen, not just for saving my life that day, but for everything that followed, for seeing something in me worth loving, worth building a life with." "I should be thanking you," Owen countered. "I was existing, not living, before you came along, just getting through each day, never looking forward to anything beyond the next season." He looked down at their daughter, then back at his wife. "You gave me a future, Tamara, a reason for everything." "And you filled my life with love," Tamara said softly. "When I was at my weakest, most vulnerable moment, you showed me kindness without expectation. You fed my body and my soul." They rode home in contented silence, the three of them together under the vast Arizona sky. The ranch appeared on the horizon, still modest by some standards, but growing and improving with each passing season. Like their love, it had been built carefully, thoughtfully, with attention to what would last rather than what might impress. As they approached the cabin that had become a home, Tamara thought about how differently her life might have turned out. If she had reached Silverdale as planned, she would have been the town's schoolteacher, respected, perhaps, but alone. Instead, a chance encounter on a dusty trail had led to everything she'd never known she wanted. A husband who cherished her, a child who delighted her, work that fulfilled her, and a place where she truly belonged. That evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold, Owen and Tamara sat on the porch, watching Sarah take her first tentative steps across the wooden boards. The little girl's face was a picture of concentration, her arms outstretched for balance, her determination evident in every movement. "She's going to be unstoppable," Owen said proudly as Sarah reached the railing and turned, beaming at her accomplishment. "Like her father," Tamara replied with a smile. "Stubborn and strong." "And clever like her mother," Owen added, reaching over to take Tamara's hand. "The best of both of us." Sarah toddled back toward them, falling into her mother's waiting arms with a delighted laugh. Tamara hugged her close, meeting Owen's gaze over their daughter's dark curls. No words were needed. Their eyes spoke of shared joy, of gratitude for the journey that had brought them together, of love that had grown from the simplest act of human kindness. As twilight deepened into night and the first stars appeared overhead, the small family remained on the porch, reluctant to end the perfect moment. The vast territory around them might be wild and sometimes harsh, but here, in this home they had created together, there was warmth, security, and abiding love, a love that had begun when a cowboy found a woman weak from hunger and chose compassion over indifference, changing both their lives forever.